Hello and welcome back to HEMA Fight Breakdowns. Today I want to talk about arm drags, or more specifically bicep ties. If you don't know what those things are, those are wrestling terms, really modern wrestling terms. I'm sure there is something like this in Fiore. I'm pretty sure I've seen pictures of it, but I don't know Fiore well enough to tell you what it's called, and reading it out in Italian is a little annoying. So I'm just going to call it that. But the reason I bring this up is because most people, when they grapple and end up in a high bind, which you're going to see in this exchange, go for really only one thing and one thing in particular, and that is to take their backhand and control their opponent's sword as quickly as possible. And what happens is, and the problem with this, is that when both people's sword arms are controlled, there's not a lot you can do from there. And it's very hard to get a good position. So what we can do is we can utilize arm drags and bicep ties to give us a better position from the start of the high bind so that more things, disarms, throws, follow-ups are possible. So now we're going to watch the exchange. And if you didn't notice, right about here, where we both miss our thrusts, we get into this classic high bind. And like I said before, the first thing that we both do is we disconnect our hands. You see my left hand going up under here and my opponent's left hand coming over here to control each other's right arms, because that is our dominant arms, and those are the ones that are controlling the sword right now. The difference between what me and my opponent are doing is that I am going for this inside key, I believe Fiore calls it, and it is very effective for essentially taking someone's right arm, in this case their right arm and their dominant arm, and pulling it to your own hip and just completely neutralizing it, keeping it out of the game. No matter what you do, once I get your sword arm and your sword down onto my hip with my left arm on top of it, you're not going anywhere. You're never getting that sword back. You're never getting that arm back unless I just let go. But my opponent is doing something a little different. And this setup turns out to pay off much better in a second, because as my opponent snakes his arm over my arm, two things happen. The first is that he does still get an overwrap over my arm, which means that I cannot use my right arm. I can't pull back. I can't pommel. I can't cut. I can't do anything. So both of our swords are completely out of the equation. But whereas I'm trying to pull my opponent's sword down, my opponent is pulling my sword arm across, which is going to put him in a far more favorable position here than I have. So right now, I have his sword completely under control, but I have him by the wrist or by the sword. He still can't use it, but I have no control over the rest of my opponent's body. If you imagine like somebody running up and grabbing you on the wrist, they have a lot of control over your arm, but they can't pull you anywhere. No matter how hard you pull or where you try to pull, it's very unlikely you're going to be able to move that person. A bicep tie, which my opponent gets right about here, is much better than a wrist lock or just grabbing the sword, because it allows you better control over your opponent's body, posture, and momentum. If you, again, imagine the same scenario, instead of grabbing the wrist, you grab the bicep or the inside of the elbow and you pull down, it's far more likely that you're going to be able to move your opponent's shoulder and their lats and basically bend them over in certain ways so that you can get them to walk in the direction that you want them to walk. In this example, my opponent grabs my arm, and by throwing it this direction towards his right, he ensures that, one, I can't use my sword, and two, when we end up here, I am not in any position to do anything. I can't throw, I can't grapple, I can't really adjust where I am, because both of my arms are essentially locked in front of me with no way to get out. And there are two key throws that you're going to look to try to execute from this position. The first is a general just kind of judo hip toss. As you're pulling your opponent forward and doing this rotation, it's a perfect opportunity to take this back leg and just whip it right in front of your opponent's legs where they're walking, just to trip them. And if you're very good, you can take your hip, put it into their hip crease, and do that full hip throw. If you're not looking to do that, or you get to here before you know it, another thing that you can do is, instead of continuing to pull in this rotational direction, which isn't likely to trip me, you can immediately reverse direction, pull the other way, take this left arm and basically push it against my head and face. And as I'm starting to back up, take that same back leg and, perhaps in a situation like this, kick out my legs so that I fall backwards. Both of those things you can do pretty much whenever you feel like, because you have put yourself in a superior grappling position based on a decision you made all the way back here. So if you're looking to improve your grapple game and you're sick of doing the I'm a little teapot, grab their arm and pull it to your hip, then this is a great alternative that can get you a lot of good results. So that's going to be it for today. If you'd like to see your own footage featured on the channel, feel free to send me a clip or a YouTube link to HEMAFightBreakdowns@gmail.com. And I hope to see you next time.